In a crowd like this, it is possible that 95% of us are in a pit. It is possible that all of us are in some pit. But the aspect of a pit is not our destiny. It is a means to our destiny. We may not be sure just how we got into that pit, and even less sure is how to get out of that pit. But let me tell you, you will be in a pit. But one thing is certain, we won't move ahead into our destiny unless we get out of that pit. So when I say Joseph was going through a pit test, we can all relate to his experience. That is literally the situation in which Joseph found himself just after receiving those glorious dreams from God. Everything had seemed to be going so well for Joseph. Then suddenly, chiripo-ripocho, from nowhere, he was in a pit. And it seemed that those dreams of honor and authority were just some kind of a cruel joke. You know, when you get into a pit, it's not like you gradually sometimes. You actually know it. And suddenly you just realize, you know, when everybody will say, this is your moment, this is your time, this is my season, this is what. And then you say, look, what happened? That was a cruel joke. Maybe it was even after a church service, everybody saying, you know what? We believe that God has got something for you. And you know, that word was powerful. You remember what we were talking about yesterday? Remember after the prayer and fasting, what we felt God was saying. You are in there, right in the pit. And then now you say, look, what was that joke? And then the brethren will come and says, no, God knows what he's doing. Don't worry. And then he says, no. This is not a place I want to hear that stuff. I am in a pit, my friend. Just now, I thought I was on a runway to take off. I can't take off anymore. There is no runway. Then you realize you're in a pit. And you might even try and say, look, maybe it's just for today. Maybe I miscalculated. Maybe. None of us get really prepared for our pits. None. Don't ever say, look, I was prepared for this. God was preparing me for this. No. That's not a pit, it's just a hardship. When you're in a pit, no one prepares you for it. You end up right there. So that is literally the situation in which Joseph found himself just after receiving those glorious dreams. So in Genesis 37:24, then they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. I like that. Why do the Bible just emphasize that the pit had no water in it? It means that, you know, I was talking to the doctors earlier on. They tell me that 2 days you can go without water. Beyond there, you are finished. So there was a 48-hour window for him to just survive the pit. Otherwise, he would have had to just die. I'm talking about a situation, a condition, a scenario, a place you find yourself physically sometimes, spiritually sometimes, emotionally sometimes. You find it's in a sustainable condition. I'm talking about sustain. It's not just one day. It's sustainable. There's no water. There's no sustainability. But you know, the longer you're going to be in it, it actually doesn't say, look, well, you can survive the pit. No, you can't survive the pit. It has its sell-by date. You have to get out. The thing is that the pit is not a life. If you stay longer in a pit, it becomes suicidal. So you've got to trust God to get out of the pit. You kill yourself. You will destroy yourself. You will not fulfill your destiny. You will be gone. And there are many cases where people never came out of the pit and they became suicidal. So God is faithful, though, to make you get out of. That's why I'm saying you don't have to prematurely end your life here because you failed to pass the pit test. You can pass it. You cannot avoid a pit, unfortunately. Some of us think we can. You know, MacGyver, we will always waltz away around pits. You know how we waltz away around potholes in Harare, you know? And you think I'm now experienced as a pit dodger. This one, my friends, you cannot avoid a pit. All of us will find ourselves in a pit. In order to fulfill and fully manifest your destiny, you will have to go through a pit. You are either thrown into a pit or you fall into a pit. Some of us are thrown into pits. Some of us actually jump into pits. And Joseph was both. He was thrown in, but he also threw himself in by his behavior. Joseph, and indeed his father, assumed his dream prematurely. That was part of him throwing himself in a pit. They assumed the dream prematurely. If Joseph had begun an attitude that says, look, I'm going to be with my brothers. I'm going to make sure I don't put on the coat of many colors to show off to them. Here he is. Him and his father form a partnership of now saying, this is your moment. Your dreams I agree with. Now go and supervise your brother. Let's start the exercises now. Let's start behaving in that authoritative manner. Those boys need to now start feeling that you're going to be the king. Of course, that young man was raw. There was no way he was going to be the prime minister of Egypt. In a way, I want you to know that when you get into a pit, even principalities and powers know that it is a temporary pit. There is always a way out. Reuben, if in the worst case scenario, Reuben was going to get this boy out and say, look, this boy, for whatever motive, for whatever reason. So your pit is not a permanent place. So I am talking about a situation that is threatening your very livelihood, that it could destroy you. It could mess you up for life. In fact, it could literally, physically kill you. As you go about your own life, it is it. Jesus in John chapter 16, verse 33, he says, these things I have spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. Now the peace is talking about that you will fall into a pit, and don't try and do a conference around how you fell into the pit. It is part of the struggle of life, but you must have peace in him. In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. Be of good cheer. Jesus knew we would have trouble because he knew we'd be living in a world contaminated by the effects of sin. He knew that. So part of your pit is because we live in a world that is contaminated with sin, with sinful people. As a consequence of sin, this world is full of trouble, and pits are just one of them. Pits are simply a byproduct of the fallen world. Oftentimes, when we find ourselves in a pit, it seems that we have had very little to do with how we got there. But if we look inward, we usually find that we have played at least some part in getting ourselves into a pit. And all too often, we don't recognize our own responsibility. And I want to just encourage you. The easier part is go right round and start blaming. It was my aunt. If it was not my parents who did this, if it wasn't for my friends, if it wasn't the economy, if it wasn't the church, if it wasn't my wife, my husband, my children, if it wasn't because they made this wrong move, it wasn't because of this, if it was because it rained that day, everything is to blame. Let me just tell you, it doesn't matter. Whether your contribution was 0.00001%, you contributed something. Part of your contribution is sustaining it. As minute and small matter it is, you need to look at yourself in the mirror and say, what was my contribution for this pit? If you don't, you're going to last a little longer in the pit. You're actually going to last long. Because if you keep thinking if you are still, let me just say this, if you're still justifying that somebody else caused this and not you, you are in a pit for a little longer than you think. Because the pit experience must strengthen you. It must sort out your character issues. It must deepen your capacity. It must widen your capacity. You must be able to say, look, it's okay. It was me. I also contributed to it. The problem is that you are also playing on the pride test. There is also the pride test that is at play. The pride test saying, don't admit. Oh, once you admit, whoa. This thing here, they pushed you. So for Joseph, you just say, look, guys, I was walking around. Yeah, I didn't give myself the coat of many colors. Come on, yeah, I'm not dead. Go put him in the pit. I got it. You didn't get it. It's not my fault. Yeah, it's your fault. You showed off. These brothers were cruel. They actually connived and conspired to kill him. They were not just saying, let's throw it. The pit was just the secondary issue. They actually wanted to kill him. So these are not good guys. So there's no justification on Joseph's brothers. Nothing. But when you're in a pit, look into the mirror and say to yourself, what was my contribution into this thing? If you want to get out of that pit, you're going to have to learn to discern the enemy's lies and resist them with the truth. The first truth we must keep in our mind in order to overcome the lies of the pit is this. It is Satan who accuses us, not God. So if you have done something wrong, so I've just said, look in the mirror, and you realize this, I did it. I contributed to this. Do not feel accused. Do not feel condemned. Because once you feel accused and once you feel condemned, it is the lie of the devil to keep you longer in the pit. Revelations 12:10-11 says, Then I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ have come, for the accuser of our brethren who accused them before our God day and night has been cast down. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And they did not love their lives to the death. The issue here is the testimony of the blood that is upon you, not the stories of accusation, how you got there. You know, the accuser of the brethren comes in so many forms and shapes. Sometimes it is your friends. Sometimes it is family. Sometimes it is brethren. These are brethren, friends. They might actually be not knowing what they're doing, but they're giving you more condemnation. When the warnings you gave for all the months can come to pass, what should you do? Guess what you do? You reach out to the guy in the pit and say, if I can do anything to get you out there, tell me what I should do. Because you are a self-justified pit dweller somewhere as well. You actually marvel to see that there is another pit dweller somewhere out there. So you're not quick to remove somebody else from a pit. Because you want to justify this whole lifestyle of pit dwellers and say, look, I am amongst normal beings who dwell in a pit. And therefore, who am I to lift one out of the pit and I remain in a pit? It's such an evil and selfish behavior. The best time to minister to somebody is when you're also in an awkward situation and you know that you're not doing it by your own power, nor by your own might, but by the Spirit of God. And that the grace of God is what you're using as part of your exercise. Not that you have managed or you have reached or you accomplished it, but you're saying, you know what? In this time, I know I need $10 to add up to the school fees, but your situation needs $10 right now. Let's get you out. What we should be doing is reaching out and saying, look, how best can I help you? And even they realize that you also got your own pieces, but you've got your own issues. You know what? I'm here. For now, I'm here. Don't worry about what I'm having to sort out after this. I'm going to have to fight some wars there, but I'm here. So be careful of the accuser of the brethren. Be careful of those who condemn. And they are not far off. They can come as an emotion, as a thought, but they can be real physical. Friends, family, husband, wife. So what do? We reach out to them because with the same grace that we practice on others, the same grace will be practiced on us too. People will know. The spiritual realm will understand that connection. And they say, with that same breath, do unto others what you would like them do unto you. It is important to understand this because the enemy is very deceptive. He will not only tell you a lie, he will also fabricate evidence to support his lies. So the enemy would then go and say, look, let's foment, let's exaggerate, let's increase the pain in the pit. So he will go and find false evidence around your pit and go and influence the people that are around you. When a story is now cooked up and you don't actually have the power to correct the story. You're not in a place to defend yourself now. It's all out there in cyberspace. So you are then asking, what do? Do you hire a band of lawyers? Do you hire a battalion of an army around you to go and source where this thing is going? Guess what? You continue trying to justify yourself in that situation. You prolong and deepen the pain of your pit experience. Sometimes when they've cooked up evidence, you know the truth. Guess what? When you're in a pit, you're not a misguided person of what you did. You know. That's why I said, look in the mirror. You know exactly what you did and what you didn't do. So you don't have to say, look, no. The truth will eventually come out and will set people free. You don't have to. One thing you must always remember is the truth. Because even if you forget it, it will reveal itself. Now, if you have to lie, you've got to be clever. You've got to use gadgets. You've got to use everything. And that keeps reminding you every time you wake up. Like Joseph's brothers say, he's dead, he's dead, he's dead. So you've got to keep reminding yourself of the fabrication. But we know one day there's going to be a famine. And you will stand up and say, I know you guys, you meant it for evil. There was nothing that you meant it for. But my God, for posterity's sake, meant it for good. You wanted to destroy me, but God allowed it to happen because he meant it for good. So I don't hold it against you anymore. Guess what? You're talking a different language. They're thinking you must revenge. You say, no, I'm not a revengist. Revenge is for the Lord. Actually, I'm going to look after you and your children. How's that? I'll look after you and your children. So I'm not going to mess around with you. I'm not going to revenge. I'm not going to report you. I'm not going to fix you. I'm not going to give you less grain. I've actually prepared the best place, which is Goshen, for you and your children. Where I am, I have access to everything I need. Now remember that when you get out of your pit, you are never going to be the same person. So don't plan to go the same way you came in. When you get out of the pit, you don't come after the people who had run a conspiracy story. No. That's the last thing you want to do because you're going backwards in your destiny. But here's the challenge. The misinformation will feel unfair. But stay above it. Stay above it. Don't try and fight for yourself. The truth will fight for you because the people will eventually see the truth just like you did. The purpose of the pit is to get us into a place where that is far down there, that the place that is so far down, we can't get ourselves out of it. A place where we can't do it on our own. And when we realize we can't do it on our own, we will cry out to God. The purpose of the pit is for you to depend and trust God. So your dependence on God is tested when you're in a pit, where you trust God for everything, even the air you're breathing. So you cry out to God for his help because you've already looked into the mirror. You've already repented of your sin. You've already realized that you've also contributed to this pit experience. And now you must cry out to God. Say, without you, I can do nothing without you. The most important question is whether you are going to call out to God in humility, or are you going to simply gripe, murmur, and complain? I think Joseph got to the reality that I messed up. I want you, God, to be the only one who gets me out of this. So one of the imaginations when you get out of the pit is that when I get out, here's Joseph. This is my own imagination. When I get out of here, I'll say sorry to my brothers. I'll go back to my dad and I'll say, Dad, please take your jacket. I don't want it. I just want to be like my brothers. I want to just head cattle. I just want to be like them. Please, let's stop this. I don't want this anymore. The way you got into the pit is not the way you are getting out of the pit. And the direction you were when you got into the pit is not the same direction you will go after the pit. So guess what you will do naturally is that your mind keeps reflecting on the good old days because you want to go back to those. Now, the good old days are good for you to just reflect on the faithfulness of God. But that's not where you are going. You will be ushered into a new dimension, a new direction, a new season, a new status. Now, when Joseph begins to pray, God shows up. The Midianites show up. They come through. But God had just ushered him into his next level of his destiny. Now, don't expect to go back to what you used to be when you get out of the pit. Otherwise, let me warn you, you will fall back into the pit. When you get out of your pit, you would have created a totally different perspective about where you're going. Therefore, relationships change, comforts change, direction change, status changes as well.